Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one. There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
May the Force be with us.
My nerd world.
Just let it in.
Ojaba. Why does she get a blaster and I don't? Ojaba.
I hope you're having a fantastic 4th of July week, depending on when you listen to the show. It is the 4th of July. I'm your host, Jon Justice, for My Nerd World and a Star Wars podcast, episode 130. Not a lot of news this week. I've enlisted the help of a fellow Star Wars fan and friend that I work with for some topics this week. Also, have some listener feedback we'll be getting to. Talk a little bit about my vacation, how it relates to Star Wars, and within sort of the things that I mentioned, we'll be talking a bit about Episode 9, a bit about The Last Jedi, and all about Star Wars. So thank you so much for checking out the show. Funny thing just happened, and it often happens when I go to do the show. I've been detached from Star Wars now for, I don't know, about a week and a half, maybe. Probably since I recorded the last podcast. I haven't watched any Star Wars movies and really taken anything in. I've been consuming other movies, which is what I'll be talking about, and how that has, well, what's happened in watching other films and what it's done for my Star Wars fandom. Like I could help it any more. Like it could be any bigger, right? But before I started the show today, because I kind of had been somewhat detached from Star Wars, I hopped online and I got on YouTube and I brought up the Last Jedi full trailer. I love that trailer, right? This is what is so interesting, fascinating, humorous, right? Is that I watched the trailer and I finished watching the trailer and started thinking about the film and the trailer, and how it really did convey what happened in the movie. You don't often hear, if ever, people go back who do podcasts or YouTube shows and retroactively visit the comments that they made during the nothing but speculation portion leading into a particular film. So, for The Last Jedi, you go back to that full trailer and how we all went and dissected every single frame of that trailer and all the speculation surrounding that whole moment at the end of, I need someone to show me my place in all of this, and then Kylo Ren extending his hand out, and was he or was he not, doing that to Rey? Those were obviously two separate scenes. That was a conversation that Rey was having with Luke, and then they cut to the scene on the Supremacy of Kylo asking Rey to join him. However, that's how that scene played out, right? Don't go this way, join me please, this kind of thing. So the trailer really did a good job of giving us a sense of what actually happened in the Last Jedi. So I watched the trailer and I immediately went to the comment section. And this is what's so funny, is that's what I was thinking. I finished the trailer thinking, wow, that trailer really did speak a lot about, there was very little misdirection in it. I mean, a lot of the events that happened are exactly the way they happened in the film. So I read this one comment, right, with this in mind. And it says this: still watching this, meaning this trailer, in 2018, play this like every month. LMAO. This trailer is still light years better than the entire movie. It's just so different from the movie in so many ways. It's almost as if the trailer is its own separate story, as is its soundtrack. One of the best trailers I've ever seen in my life. I'll give that to them. But it's also a trap. I gotta go on. And the comments cut off, but it's also a trap, and it doesn't get any further than that. I mean, again, you want the quintessential example of how art is so subjective. There it is. Like, I watched the trailer thinking, wow, that trailer really caught and grabbed the essence of The Last Jedi in a way that none of us really realized, obviously, when we saw the trailer originally before we saw the movie. And yet here, one of the first comments on here was somebody who said that the trailer was completely different. I do not get it. Somebody else says, the trailer looks darker and more serious. The title is red. The filter is darkened. But the actual movie starts with a your mama joke by Poe Dameron and can't even go 2 minutes without a forced joke. Canto Bite is probably the good. You know what? I can't. I just can't. You cannot do anything for the people that do not like The Last Jedi. What do you know? And what a bummer. What a bummer for them. What a bummer for them. Because I've been watching a ton of movies. Like I said, I've been on vacation all this week. It's Wednesday. And since probably last week and then up until like last night, I've been consuming a lot of movies set in space. I mentioned last week this project that I've been working on. So I've just been consuming a lot of films taking place in outer space and specific genres. And so I made a list, right, of movies that I've watched over the course of the past 2 weeks and this week. So After Earth, the Will Smith and his son movie, directed by M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong. I like that movie. It's good. Not great, but it's enjoyable. Independence Day Resurgence. Not a good film by any stretch, but sat down and watched it the other day and actually found myself really enjoying it for what it was. Let's see. Chronicles of Riddick. The second one. I enjoy those movies quite a bit. Did when they came out. Still do. A little dated on the special effects, but they were very, very ambitious. That second movie, the sequel to Pitch Black, was incredibly ambitious. And I really respected what the filmmaker was trying to do, because it's very difficult to go, and I've mentioned this before, George Lucas ruined it for everybody. It's very difficult to go and create a fantasy space opera without having it be compared to Star Wars, especially when it's, you have to have it focused on Earth. It has to be Earth-based. If it's not, then it just is Star Wars. And so if you're actually going to create a fantasy space epic action film and have it based off of Earth with new fantasy elements, I mean, that's a very bold move. And so I enjoyed the movie for that. And the third one's interesting, too. The third one's kind of a combination. Just the one that's just called Riddick, kind of a combination of the first two movies put together, and very incredibly violent. My 12-year-old or my 11-year-old can't watch that one for a while. Incredibly violent movie. So I watched that. Watched 2012. Been watching a lot of disaster movies. Started working through the latter half of the Fast and Furious movies because Melinda hadn't seen them. So we watched 5, 6, and 7 over the course of 3 nights. Went to the theater and saw Sicario, A Day of the Soldado. Loved the original one. Denis Villeneuve, who did Blade Runner 2049. Loved the original one. Enjoyed the second one quite a bit. Very grim film, but I liked it a lot. So those were good movies. And so these are the movies that I've been watching. But moving through, especially the Fast and Furious films, it made me appreciate Star Wars so much more, if that's even possible. Even the Chronicles of Riddick and Independence Day, and specifically The Last Jedi. These are movies that made a ton of money, right? Really wish that I could watch Solo right now in the wake of these as well, simply because that movie was very artfully done. But when you look at those films and compare them to a movie like The Last Jedi, I know we're talking about two different genres, right? You're talking about, sort of this weird hybrid, car action movie that's now turned into sort of this bizarro James Bond-esque thing. And when you get into 6, 7, and 8 of the Fast and Furious films compared to Star Wars, right, a space opera. But when you look at how Rian Johnson was so careful to craft The Last Jedi the way that he did, And even looking at The Force Awakens compared to the movies that I've been watching, and then comparing it to The Last Jedi really, really stands out. It's an action movie. It is a family movie that you can watch with your kids. It's a drama. It's a space opera, but it's also an incredibly well crafted and carefully crafted piece of work that just stands apart. Probably going to watch it later on tonight. Although there is something else that I'm going to mention Star Wars related that I may end up watching tonight. But I just, you look at these other popcorn films that get released, and you could say Roland Emmerich, when you look at a movie like Independence Day Resurgence in 2012, I mean, he's got a knack for that disaster, large-scale, epic films, but they still lack any type of, artistic integrity. You look at, After Earth, sort of more of a straightforward sci-fi film. Sicario's different, right? Those are dramas, crime dramas, for lack of a better term. But honestly, probably has, especially the original Sicario. The original Sicario probably has a lot more in common with The Last Jedi than, say, any of the other movies that I listed off. Because Denis Villeneuve is kind of like he's not kind of, as he is. He's one of those filmmakers as well that is very, very careful in the way that he crafts shots and tells a story. And so it was just a really interesting experience stepping back away from Star Wars for a moment and then watching these other films, and especially these films that again are so popular, and then comparing them to The Last Jedi, and then you get into the controversy part of it, right? And there's a place where you can go and have a discussion about the controversy relating to what I'm talking about too, because again, keeping with that mindset of a director being as authentic and as genuine as possible, they're reaching the widest audience that they're capable of reaching. And so you're only going to be able to craft something special by doing that. Like this ridiculous movement, in case you haven't heard about it, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but there's this ridiculous movement out there right now to remake The Last Jedi, and their whole idea is to make a movie that is equally pleasing to all the fandom. Yeah, you would have to turn it into like a Fast and the Furious 8 film. First off, it's impossible to do that. But secondly, that's what it would end up being. It would end up being sort of a weird hybrid of The Force Awakens and a Fast and Furious movie that didn't have any artistic merit to it whatsoever. I mean, just what a ridiculous notion. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Give me more Rian Johnson divisive Star Wars movies. I want more. I want more of that. That's risk taking that is going to propel, the fandom. It may repel some of the fandom, but it's going to keep the fandom alive. It's going to keep individuals like me who, I mean, arguably I'm going to stay with the franchise. But if you water it down, if we got a bunch more movies that are more aligned with The Force Awakens, kind of would. I mean, I love The Force Awakens, don't get me wrong, and I can't wait for Episode 9. But I want something a little bit more challenging because the original Star Wars was challenging. All right, one more little point on this, and then we'll move on to a couple of other topics this week. A little bit looser show. I mean, it may not. At least it feels like it to me. Again, not a lot of news, so I just wanted to make sure I did a show this week and wanted to talk Star Wars, and so I'm kind of keeping it a little bit looser than normal. Rian Johnson, though, was responding to somebody on Twitter. A user on Twitter had made a comment, right? The difference between Rian Johnson and George Lucas. And this user on Twitter went and pulled up an old interview. Okay? This was an interview done with George Lucas. And George Lucas said this: "You don't want to kill Luke. I think you..." Lucas said, this is an interview with Kasdan and Lucas. Kasdan says, "I think you should kill Luke and have Leia take over." And then Lucas says, "You don't want to kill Luke." And Kasdan says, "Okay, then kill Yoda." And Lucas says, "I don't want to kill Yoda. You don't have to kill people. You're a product of the 1980s. You don't go around killing people. It's not nice. I think you alienate the audience. Kazan says, I'm saying that the movie has more emotional weight if someone you love is lost along the way. The journey has more impact. And then Lucas responds with this. I don't like that. I don't believe that. I have always hated that in movies when you go along and one of the main characters gets killed. This is a fairy tale. You want everybody to live happily ever after, and nothing bad happens to anybody. The whole emotion I'm trying to get at the end of the film is for you to be really uplifted, emotionally and spiritually, and feel really good about life. Now, here's the funny thing, is that Rian Johnson replied with a series of screenshots. The first screenshot was Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru all torched up, skeletons on Tatooine. Then a shot of Vader taking out Obi-Wan, or Obi-Wan disappearing on the Death Star. Then a shot of Luke getting his hand chopped off, and then a shot of Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back getting ready to drift off into sleep. There was another part, and I think there was actually more where you get into the prequel trilogy, and there was and that's right. Then Rian Johnson went and tweeted again. And basically he said, and for bonus, he included the shots of Darth Maul getting killed and Qui-Gon Jinn getting killed and Padme dying. So he makes a really good point, okay? So it's at this point that Rian Johnson ends up getting a response from this particular guy. And this guy says, this is Synchronic Design, right? Says this. I appreciate the response, Ryan. My main gripes are that you abandoned the spirit and heart of Star Wars in favor of your own ideas, opinions, and mindset, rather than continuing a 40-year legacy. Skywalker and the rest of almost everything in the film subverted all that was. Now, here's the funny thing, again. I completely disagree with that. And again, talking about how subjective art is, I completely disagree with that notion. Abandon the spirit and the heart of Star Wars in favor of your own ideas, opinions, and mindset rather than continuing a 40-year legacy? I absolutely, personally feel like he continued a 40-year legacy. Now, this is where it gets really good. So Rian Johnson goes and responds, and this is what he says. For me, The Last Jedi 100% distills what the spirit and heart of Star Wars has been in my life. But yes, it is personal. It's a certain point of view, and it has to be. The originals were personal for George Lucas, and that's why they're alive. Star Wars films will truly betray the heart and spirit of the originals if they lose that. And then he adds, and become soulless, clean homages. But being alive means being messy, and it means every film won't line up exactly with what every fan is expecting or wants. I'm sorry, The Last Jedi didn't line up with your own certain point of view. Really, honestly, I am. And then he wrote MTFBY, BWY. May the force be with you. And again, that just goes back to what I've said and what I'll continue to say on the podcast. Not only how subjective, artistry is, but you as a content creator, if you can be as authentic and as genuine as possible, you will reach the widest audience that you are capable of reaching, right? The byproduct of that is that there's going to be people that are not going to get it. And they're not going to like it. But the people that do get it and the people that do like it are going to love it. And you'll still reach, again, that widest audience you're capable of reaching. With the radio show that I do, and it's a little different now because I'm hosting with somebody else, and so it's not 100% my, I want to say creative vision, but my direction in doing the show. It's a lot, but it's not, you got to give and take and, talk about things that I normally wouldn't necessarily want to talk about because the other host has ideas and things that they want to talk about. But when I was doing the show by myself prior to getting this job, for the 9 years that I was in Tucson, I used that same method, and it's absolutely true. There were people that were big fans of talk radio, but didn't like my show because they didn't understand what it was I was doing. Being more self-deprecating and putting in a lot of humor and sarcasm. A lot of people just didn't get it because it didn't fit their idea of what talk radio should be. But for the people that did, man, they were hardcore fans. And still are to this day, even though I'm not in Tucson, Arizona, doing that same, show anymore. I love what Rian Johnson did. And let me go to, like I said, a friend of mine from work, Jon Justice. I reached out to him because I was looking for some ideas for the show this week, and he wrote me a lengthy email with a lot of really good ideas. But one of the things that he mentioned, and I'll go get to the rest of his email a little bit later on in the show, but one of the things that he mentioned was watching The Last Jedi a few nights ago on Netflix. And before I get to his comments, I do find it interesting that they put out The Last Jedi on Netflix. I know they put Rogue One on Netflix, okay? And so it's not a huge surprise they put The Last Jedi on Netflix. However, I can't help but wonder if they specifically did it to get the movie out to more people, to give people more an opportunity to go and watch it again. I could be completely off base. This may have been part of the plan all along, but Jon Kasdan, who co-wrote Solo, a Star Wars story with his dad, he made a comment on Twitter about a month ago saying that Disney and Lucasfilm do listen to the fans. And, I've heard from a lot of people, a lot of detractors of The Last Jedi who, on second viewing, really ended up appreciating the movie more so than they did the first time around. And so I've seen a lot of people, and my friend John here included, who ended up revisiting The Last Jedi on Netflix just because it was on Netflix. Here's what John had to say, though. Watching The Last Jedi a few nights ago, now that it's on Netflix, and man, I really enjoyed it. As I watched it, I broke down the segment a little in my head, and I really can't fathom why some people are so against it. Did I want a kick-ass Luke Skywalker, most powerful Jedi ever, epic lightsaber battle? Got the battle, just not necessarily with Luke. Yeah, I guess I was hoping for it and kind of expected it, but the Luke I got is a much more interesting character. A lost and broken Luke is someone I want to see build himself back up, which he obviously did in the movie. Plus, if that wasn't the Luke we got, how would the First Order have risen to power anyways? If Big Bad Luke was on patrol all over the galaxy and training new Jedi, wouldn't he have snuffed out Snoke before he even had a chance to gain power? So if we did have the all-powerful Luke, we'd never even have a new trilogy. I personally never needed to see or had any desire to see a big, bad, fully formed Luke Jedi Master. To me, that reached its pinnacle at the end of Return of the Jedi, and I got everything that I wanted. But I also was one that never needed to see Han, Luke, and Leia again in a film. I mean, I'm glad that we did, obviously, but that was never anything that really, I don't know, anything that my fandom really needed. We had them in the original films, and I loved them in the original films, and I want new Star Wars and a new generation, and I was always happy with them passing the torch. So I never had a problem with, spoiler alert, Han dying, and for as sad as it was that Carrie Fisher is no longer with us, I'm sure that J.J. Abrams will handle that just fine. I'm completely satisfied with the fact that Luke and Leia ended up having a moment again on Crait at the end of the Last Jedi. But I agree with John, absolutely. We got a great Jedi. We got Luke really adhering to what the Jedi is supposed to be. And I love the fact that at the end of The Last Jedi, when he is force projecting himself to Crait, that he does force project himself that's more in line with how he looked in that pivotal confrontation in the hut with Ben Solo. And I know that was intentional, but to me it speaks volumes that, one, he's kind of trolling Ben, now Kylo Ren, in looking like he did then, but I also think that that's how Luke imagines himself in his mind. It's like Neo going into the Matrix, or anybody going into the Matrix, and how you project what you think you look like, right? The best version of yourself. The thing that we can only do on Facebook or on Instagram, when we only post the right photos and put up the right content to give everybody sort of a greatest hits of your life. And it was always way more relatable to me that Luke was going to have his failures and had to fall again and pick himself back up, because what we all have to do. If you are a believer in the Lord God Almighty, right? We all sin, fall short of the glory of God. Okay, so, as a Christian, that's something that I can very much relate to, is Luke's character. And even if you're not a Christian, totally cool. But even if you're not, you go back to the original mythology and the works of Joseph Campbell, and it all matches up, right? It all has very similar themes of redemption and resurrection and falling down and picking yourself back up again. I mean, there were books written based off of the Force from A New Hope back in the 70s and early 80s that were Christian books that were trying to tie in Christianity with what George was conveying in Star Wars. I mean, we all know that George was taking a much sort of broader swipe at religion in and of itself in the way that he crafted the Force, but there are the elements there. And the Matrix is the same way. I won't spend time going down the road of the Matrix, but if you look at, and if you don't like the second two, that's fine, but if you look at that original Matrix film, it really, it traces itself from, in a lot of ways, the Christian faith. When you go and look at what Neo has to go through and what the Matrix represents, it's really, really, really interesting. So, again, just to reiterate, that Luke that we got in The Last Jedi, to me, was way more relatable and believable than an all-powerful Luke Skywalker, as Jon said, sort of, roaming the galaxy, making sure that everything was the way that it needed to be. All right, let's switch gears.
When I found you, I saw raw, untamed power. And beyond that, something truly special.
So earlier today, I was going to sit down and do the show. And I have a bit of a process I go through. I put in some notes. I go to where the file gets uploaded. And I put in the content for what's going to be on the podcast and the details, and come up with a title and write down some notes and get everything out in front of me. So, as I mentioned at the start of the show, before I went and actually started recording the show, I went and watched that Last Jedi trailer. But earlier today, when I was just putting together the notes of the show, I wanted something on in the background. So I went into my DVD and Blu-ray collection, and I pulled out the Getty Tartakovsky Star Wars Clone Wars, not the Clone Wars, Star Wars Clone Wars cartoons that came out in the early 2000s, right? And obviously based off the Clone Wars, not canon anymore, but still some great storytelling. A lot of stuff hinted at. That ended up in the Clone Wars. This was kind of an experiment by George Lucas. He wanted to see if Star Wars worked in this capacity, and it was kind of a lead-in to him doing the 3D animation, the Clone Wars. So I threw it on, and within about 2 episodes, because altogether it's about 2 hours worth of content. But when those Getty Tartakovsky, there was a micro series. They were like 3 and 4 minute like little vignettes. But because of that, when you watch them back to back to back, it moves at just a wicked pace. And it's really fun to watch. And so I threw it on, and I didn't even get many of my notes done because I was just immediately engrossed in this 2D animation. And it really speaks to the power of how, not just Star Wars, because Gendy really got the visuals down pat. he really was able to invoke the nostalgia of the original Star Wars trilogy in a way that is not done, in my opinion. And I love the Clone Wars cartoon series, don't get me wrong, but he really does. I mean, the opening shot of the first episode is Yoda on the back of what appears to be a Tauntaun. It sounds like a Tauntaun, but he's not on Hoth. He's on more of a standard sort of planet landscape. Really reminiscent of, and this was before then, obviously, but of Rey on the speeder in that trailer shot of going across the Jakku desert with the Star Destroyer in the background and the downed X-Wing fighter in the foreground. But there's just so many shots in that cartoon series that are lifted directly from the original films. And I sat down and started watching it, and I turned it off because I'm like, man, I want to watch this later. Because I forgot how much I love this series and how much it feels like Star Wars. I mean, it absolutely 100% feels like Star Wars. If you, and again, they don't make them anymore, they're not canon. If you have not been able, if you don't have a copy of these, they're two. It's a set of 2 discs, and again, it's about 2 hours long total. Later in the series, they ended up extending them. They became like 10-minute series, 10-minute episodes, whereas originally they were like 3-minute episodes. So the pacing is in the second season is a little slower than the first season because of how short those other episodes were, but it's still just as good. And it takes you right up to the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. It's a really fun watch if you've never done it before. One, go on YouTube, go on Amazon. You can watch them on YouTube. I'm pretty sure they're there. You can buy them off Amazon or off eBay. Get your hands on them because it really is a fun watch, especially if you want to see a version, because we never saw the Clone Wars series line up with Revenge of the Sith, right? You know, it sort of ends with that, the regular season ends with that Ahsoka arc, and then we get the Lost episodes. But they never had the opportunity to carry it all the way up to that opening battle over Coruscant. They do in the Tartakovsky series, and it's really, really cool. And I've watched them back-to-back before, and it's pretty fun. So, again, if you don't have it, if you've never watched it, or if you haven't visited it in a long time, I would really, really encourage you to do so, especially because we're getting so much Star Wars content, and we're getting that Resistance 2D animation series. Watching these again got me really excited for that 2D animation series, because if, you know, we get so used to seeing the films the way they are because the special effects are so good now, and at least I do. You get so used to seeing 3D animation that, you know, for me, I have a bit of a block. Oh, it's 2D. You know, you go back and watch the original Disney films, and they're still great, you know, but I kind of have to go, oh, do I want to watch that as 2D animation? And it's kind of like that with this series. I threw it on, though, and I forgot just how powerful even the 2D animation. Real simple. I mean, real simple graphics, too. I mean, it's not even just 2D animation. I mean, it's 2D animation and real simple artwork, but it is just fantastic Star Wars. So that's your homework assignment. So go and go and get to it. All right, we have just enough time to go through some of the listener feedback, and I do want to start with the rest of the email from my friend John. And again, I reached out to him and said, hey, you got anything, anything you think would be interesting to talk about on the show this week? And here's what he had to say. He's out, what about some speculation on what sort of things we may see in 9? Will we see Rey build a new lightsaber? I'm assuming we will, but that's something that's never really been shown in a movie. We've seen it a few times in Rebels, in the Clone Wars, but I really think it'd be cool to see that happen. One of the biggest, I don't want to say mistakes, because that's a wrong way to put it. I really wish George Lucas had put in the deleted scene for Return of the Jedi of Luke building his lightsaber on Tatooine before he goes into Jabba's palace. If you've never seen it before, you have the Blu-rays. They're all the deleted scene is there, but it's basically Luke in a cave. He's got his hood up, and he's using the Force, and he's building his lightsaber. Now, it doesn't align. You couldn't put it in now because there's no way to explain how R2-D2 ends up with the lightsaber in his dome. Okay, so it was removed. But that scene feels so The Empire Strikes Back to me, and speaks volumes to Luke's power and the mythology, the almost spiritual aspect of building your own lightsaber. So I wish that it was in the movie and they would have sort of redid. I mean, I would have rather have seen that than seen it is a little ridiculous. Sort of the ridiculousness of him putting the lightsaber in R2-D2's dome, knowing at some point he was going to go and shoot it out his dome and have him catch it. But we won't get into how kind of silly that is. I would have much rather have seen that sort of that small, quiet moment. And I would love, and I'm with you, John. I'd love to see Rey, building a lightsaber. I don't think we will, because everyone's expecting a time jump, and from what little news that we've had of the shooting beginning, and Driver maybe having a beard, and Finn maybe having longer hair, I think it's pretty safe to say there's going to be a significant time jump in this film. But I agree with you. I would love to go and see that. I would like to see, and this is very fan servicey, and people have been mentioning this all along because of the fact that Rey was so proficient with her staff. I'd love to see her go and make a double-bladed lightsaber. A green double-bladed lightsaber, I think. Or take the existing Kyber crystal, make it blue, but have it be a double-bladed lightsaber. I just talk about going and tying in the whole trilogy. That would be a really unique and interesting way to go and do that. I think that would be really, really cool, and would offer up a different dynamic in terms of the sword play. We could bookend the trilogy, having somebody at the series of films, having somebody at the beginning using a double-bladed lightsaber, and having Rey at the end use a double-bladed lightsaber. I would love to see that. All right, John goes on to write, what about how we've seen vehicles evolve over the saga? I know you're big into the vehicles, me too. I thought it was really interesting in Solo how the Falcon had a single laser cannon, and we know Han eventually upgraded to the quad lasers. So what new and improved things are we going to see in Episode 9? We've already seen the upgraded Star Destroyers, and Snoke's ship was crazy awesome, so you know JJ is going to come up with something super cool. They could even have a nice bridge about watching vehicles evolve as much as we watch our characters evolve. He says, maybe I'm grasping at straws. No. I think you're onto something. What I hope to see is if we really are going to go and bring all of these movies together, then one of the ways to do it would be to reach back out to the prequel trilogy and some of those designs. I think it's fair to say that Naboo is still there, and Naboo still has an army, right? So how great would it be to see some upgraded 60-year upgraded versions of Naboo starfighters? I would love to see old school Naboo starfighters. I'd love to see old school X-Wings. This is the one thing that I always, I'm not annoyed, but this is the one thing that I always thought was a missed opportunity, and at least it has been so far. And that is with the new movies, because you can't do it with the original trilogy, because they are done and the prequels were done afterwards. But to me, I'd love to see a Jedi starfighter from like the one we saw in Revenge of the Sith. I'd love to see a Jedi starfighter from Attack of the Clones. Right? I mean, these are space vehicles. They do age like automobiles, but we do have cars that have been on the road for a really, really long time. They're antiques, but the Millennium Falcon's an antique. And I love the idea of seeing upgraded ships from different parts of the galaxy that we saw from the prequels. But also, what if the army or the rebellion that rises up to take on the First Order is such a hodgepodge of individuals joining the fight from around the galaxy that we end up seeing those old school ships? The idea of seeing Because I really do love the Revenge of the Sith Jedi Starfighter. With the wings that open up, there was that weird, bizarro hybrid between a TIE fighter and the Jedi Starfighter from Attack of the Clones, and I love that Jedi Starfighter from Attack of the Clones. To see one of those in Episode 9, to see a bunch of those, to see some Naboo Starfighters, and then upgraded versions of those, to me, if you want to tie the movies together, that is how you do it. There's been some speculation of shooting taking place in Caserta, Italy, and there's been some talk about whether or not it is or isn't going to be Star Wars, but somebody from that region said they are expecting a big production to take place. I think it would be awesome to go and return to Naboo, but you want to talk about bridging the gap, do it from a visual standpoint. Let's go back to Coruscant. That would be amazing. Let's see those ships. That would be amazing. The idea of seeing, oh my gosh, the idea of seeing Rey in a Jedi Starfighter, oh my gosh, it makes me want to cry. That would be so incredible. Or even some old school X-Wing fighters. There's no reason why they shouldn't still be around. Somebody should be flying them, right? I love seeing the upgraded version of the A-Wing was cool. And I get why they did it, and you have to have newer versions. But I think it would have been sweet if they had thrown a couple other versions in there. That's why I kind of like Battlefront. It doesn't always work in Battlefront 2 when you get the hero ships, but it is kind of fun to be in what is supposed to be like a later era, but I'm able to go and fly an older ship. I think that's really cool. One more comment on that too, and is that I'm with John. I love seeing the upgrades of the ships. I wish we could see more of that in the movies themselves. I think it would be really cool to be able to see the retrofitting being done. I know it doesn't really lend itself to a good use of screen time unless you're having some dialogue. But I always envisioned a Star Wars spin-off movie kind of like the Jeff Bridges movie Tucker about when he made the car. How great would it be if we had a smaller budget Star Wars spin-off movie that was based on the first X-Wing fighter that was built? Like, I have this whole story in my head of like a dad who lost a relative during, or like a son or a daughter during one of the battles because the ship that she was flying just wasn't up to snuff, and so he decided to go and try to build a better starfighter for Incom and ended up creating the first ever X-Wing and had to put it through its paces. Or maybe it was a daughter who lost her dad, even better, and she was the one that did it. I just think that would make an amazing, just sort of very personal, small film. So looking at the clock, and we're out of time, and I've got more stuff to go do. So again, that was a show. I hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully we have some news next week. It's a little less me rambling and a little bit more, stuff that we can chew on. We didn't even get a new Star Wars show this week. Although, as I said last week, depending on the level of content that we would get, I'm kind of okay with the fact that we didn't get a new Star Wars show this week. So drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com. Thank you, John, for the suggestions this week. I really appreciate it. Special shout out to a friend of the show, Bonnie Fisher, turned me on to a really interesting article that I haven't had a chance to read through entirely because I just got it yesterday, but really, really interesting article talking about the fandom, and she's wrote me a lengthy email that we'll be talking about on next week's show, along with all the rest of your listener feedback. So drop me a note on YouTube. You can also subscribe on iTunes. You can find me on Spreaker, Stitcher, Podbean. I think that's it, right? I think that's all of them. Yeah. So I hope you had a great holiday week, and we'll be back for episode number 131 again next week. Until then, may the Force be with you.
The Force will be with you, always.
My nerd world.